Hello YouTube, welcome back to the Card Combo Show with me, Chocobilly, where we look at the weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week I'm going to be looking at cards that interact with blocking. So, this week it is Snow from Opus 1, Ninja from Opus 2, Malboro from Opus 4, Ardyn from Opus 11, and finally Vargas from Opus 15. Okay, so first up we've got Snow. When Snow blocks, choose one forward, dull it. And he's got the Vendetta S, which is an S and Ice. Until the end of the turn, Snow gains plus 2000 power and first strike. You can only use this ability while Snow is blocking. He's a 3CP 7k Ice forward. So, I mean, there's better Snows that get played more often these days, but he's unique because he's one of the few cards that actually has an effect when he blocks, something happens as well. And that can be quite useful. So you combo that with something like Hope, who is also in 13 as well, so that means that there is some kind of synergy between the two already. When an active character opponent controls becomes dull due to your summons or abilities, freeze it. So it means if you block with Snow and you get to dull out another of your opponent's forwards, you can also freeze it using Hope also. Then you've got General Leo. Now this is an interesting little mixture because also General Leo, whilst it makes it so your opponent can't cast, or no one can cast summons, also all your forwards have to block. But this actually works with something like Snow because if you're playing him, chances are you want him to be blocking. So you're going to be leaving him there to be able to block your opponents. But obviously with that it means that General Leo will have to block as well. So you can actually use Snow's ability to be able to make your General Leo safe. Because when you block with Snow, you can then dull out General Leo, meaning that he then doesn't have to block. So if Snow is going to die, and you can see that General Leo is going to have to take the next attack, you can then make it so that General Leo will still survive. But yeah, it works nicely with cards when you've got a lot of things that you want to be blocking with, and obviously you have the Vendetta S ability as well, which means that you can make Snow quite a bit stronger to be able to block with First Strike, which is always quite nice. Sarah and Lugae. Now Sarah's, you know, no stranger to using Snow because that was a weird way of phrasing it, sorry. Because obviously she's geared towards him. If you control a card named Snow, it cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities, which is quite nice. Now, if you combine that with General Leo, then your opponent's going to have a lot of trouble getting rid of Snow without blocking. And if you combine that with Lugae, when a forward enters your field, you may remove a Lugae from the game. If you do so, that forward gains plus 2000 power and Brave. So now it means that Snow can attack and have Brave, and he is a 9k, so he's pretty big. He will also, whenever he blocks, gets to dull out one of your opponent's forwards. With Snare, it means that he cannot be chosen by abilities, and with General Leo, it means that summons cannot be cast. So there's a lot of combinations there, which basically means that Snow becomes very hard to get rid of, and will stop your opponent from attacking as well. And then finally we have Anima. So when a forward opponent controls put from field into the break zone, choose one forward opponent controls, dull it. That means that if Snow blocks, and maybe you're using his Vendetta S, or maybe you've made him big through some other means, if Snow blocks, kill something, you get to actually dull two things out of the way. One from the forward you killed using Anima, and you can also use Anima's ability to deal 2k to just a forward anyway. So maybe Snow wasn't quite going to kill it, but Snow's going to die. You still get to dull something out using Snow, and then you can use Anima to finish that forward off to then dull out another forward on your opponent's field. Alright, next up we have Ninja. Pay 2 Lightning, break Ninja as well as the forward that blocks or is blocked by Ninja, and it's a 2CP 3k Lightning forward. Now Ninja, I think, is a severely underrated card because he does require your opponent to either block or be blocking. You know what I mean. But the fact is that you pay 2 Lightning and it's a unrestricted, untargeted break. So it doesn't matter who Ninja is blocking. If that forward can be broken, it will be broken by Ninja, and it might have things like it cannot be targeted by abilities or summons. Doesn't matter because Ninja is not targeting. It's just simply in Ninja's text, the forward blocking or blocked by Ninja is broken. I really like it. So, Cuchulainn the Impure. Maybe your opponent is attacking with a forward that cannot be broken. Play Cuchulainn, loses abilities, now it can be broken. Now obviously you are paying 1 for Cuchulainn and 2 for the Ninja's ability as well. They're costing a lot, but if it's a forward that is quite troublesome and ultimately that can't be broken, it means it's probably worth playing this just to get rid of that forward. Begamnon. So when Begamnon enters the field, choose one forward opponent controls. Activated. It gains, if possible, this forward must block until the end of the turn. So your opponent has a troublesome forward that you really want to get rid of. You play a Begamnon, it becomes active, they now must block it. You attack with Ninja, knowing full well that forward has to block. You pay the 2 Lightning, you kill that troublesome forward. Paravir. So I mentioned about getting rid of your opponent's abilities to not be able to be broken, but you can also make it so that your ninja cannot be broken as well. Now, it's not a prerequisite that ninja does break, as his break ninja, as well as the forward that blocks or is blocked by ninja, comes after the colon, which means that it's just that's the outcome. That is the effect. So you pay the 2 lightning, break ninja, as well as the forward that blocks or is blocked by ninja. But ninja, again, it's not choosing ninja, so it doesn't mean that it's losing its target. So ninja won't break, but the forward that your opponent has blocked or is attacking with also breaks. Actually, no, sorry, you're playing Paravis, so that would probably be that it has blocked with. But still, I mean, chances are your opponent's probably not going to block if you've played Paravir, but, you know, if they're at 6 points of damage and you have ninja, maybe you've got a couple of ninjas down, you know, and you played Paravir, both your ninjas can't be blocked, can't be broken, sorry. You attack with them and you get to kill something. Pretty nice. Aranea, so ninja more than likely is going to be killing herself when it kills one of your opponent's forwards. But playing something like Aranea to get it back on the field means that it can be troublesome for your opponent. Now, they're not too hard to kill, really, but they are pretty cheap and they are pretty effective. So your opponent, ninja may actually be some sort of a lightning rod for your opponent to really be like, I need to go as ninja, otherwise it's going to kill my things. So yeah, having Aranea to constantly recur that forward as well, even if it's killing itself or just being killed by your opponent, have it there constantly threatening your opponent is really useful. Vargas. So when a forward other than Vargas is put from the field into the break zone, Vargas gains plus 3,000 power until the end of the turn. So ninja would kill itself plus the forward that is blocking or blocked. That's 2 forwards, which actually means Vargas will gain plus 3,000 twice. So it becomes a 13k forward without any other buffs. That's pretty good. And finally again, Anima. So when a forward opponent controls put from field into the break zone, choose one forward opponent controls and dull it. So ninja kills himself, kills another forward, you get to dull something else. Fine. Right, Malboro. So it is a water monster of 3 CP. Pay 1 water until the end of the turn. Malboro also becomes a forward with 6,000 power, and when Malboro blocks or is blocked, all the forwards opponent controls lose 2,000 power until the end of the turn. You can only use this ability once per turn. So the fact that all your opponent's forwards lose 2,000 is really strong, and the reason I chose this Malboro over the other one, which only becomes a forward on your turn, is because of the fact that you can use it on either your opponent's or your turn. So you can block with him or attack with him, and your opponent still has to worry about that effect. So, Vayne. Obviously, Malboro is a pretty small forward, so having something like Vayne come down to make him then effectively an 8k forward, which then could, you know, block a 9k and survive, or a 10k and trade, that's really, really good. Actually, no, sorry, he could block a 10k and survive because your opponent's forwards would lose 2,000 power as well. So it's an excellent power swing, which using Malboro also means you get even more of that power swing to your advantage as well. So your opponent's forwards would all be minus 4,000 power, which is nuts. And your Malboro would be plus 2, so just a great combination. Alright, Begamnon. So again, similar sort of thing, but this time you are not only forcing your opponent's forward to have to block, but it also means that all of your opponent's forwards are then going to lose 2,000 power. So it means that maybe you are full well going to swing Malboro into a forward that you know is going to kill it, but at least that means actually all your opponent's forwards then are losing a lot of power. And yeah, minus 2k to your opponent's board is pretty strong, and if you combine that with some other form of board-wide effect, that could actually be quite devastating for them. Chalinka, so similar sort of thing. Maybe you play Malboro, your opponent has to block, and they've got something like General Leo, or, you know, they're just on 6 points of damage. You attack a Malboro, minus 2k to your opponent's board. You attack a Malboro again, another minus 2k to your opponent's board. You can combine this with some other form of making your opponent have to block as well if you really wanted to. That would require you to be tricolour, but, you know, that's not impossible at all. But still, just a funny way to be able to really apply the pressure to your opponent when you've got all these forwards that are reducing your opponent's power and just kind of threatening their whole board at the same time. Yuzuki, so if a water forward you control is dealt damage by, reduce the damage by 2,000 instead. So this would actually mean that if Malboro were blocked, you get to minus 2k your opponent's board, but then, let's say the forward that's blocking Malboro is an 8k forward, that would then go down to a 6k forward, which would trade Malboro, but then when Malboro is dealt damage, if you've got Yuzuki on the field, that damage is then reduced by 2,000 as well. So Malboro would still trade with that forward, but Malboro would survive. Oh no, sorry, he wouldn't trade with it. Malboro would still kill that forward, but he would still survive. So yeah, just another way to be able to kind of boost your own field while still reducing your opponent's. Lava Spider, so just a nice way to be able to make sure that your Malboro is huge, but if your opponent does block, probably going to kill it. Walker, I believe that this card will get played again one day. His Status Reels S ability is just fantastic. I absolutely love it. So Status Reels S and 1 water. Choose 1 forward. Until the end of the turn, it loses all its abilities and its power becomes 1000. That's actually quite a strong ability. The problem is that Walker's just a bit too slow. He doesn't have an entry ability and he doesn't have an EX or anything like that, so this doesn't quite cut it, unfortunately. But still, if your opponent decides to block with a forward, obviously that will trigger Malboro's ability. You can then, on the stack, use Walker's ability to make it so that that forward then becomes a 1k forward. That resolves, becomes 1k. Malboro's effect takes effect. Yeah. And then it's reduced by 2k. Its power goes to minus 1000, and it pops. And Diablo. So a nice way to be able to make sure that you're killing something. So maybe even your opponent's blocking with something huge that is just really hard to get rid of. You attack the Malboro, they block, minus 2k, you then cast Diablos, as I said, its power, minus, and you get to break it. Even though it was going to be a forward that ultimately would have killed Malboro, because its power got reduced, you can cast Diablo, kill it. Ardyn, he is a 5 CP 9k Earth forward. When Ardyn enters the field, choose 1 forward opponent controls. It cannot attack or block until the end of the next turn, and when Ardyn is put from the field into the break zone by your opponent's summons or abilities, play Ardyn onto the field at the end of the turn. There's always been a bit of confusion about what that final line means, and I'll just clarify it here. So if Ardyn's put from the field into the break zone by blocking or combat damage, that doesn't count. If his power is reduced to 0 by a summon or ability, that doesn't count either. The reason behind that is the fact that his power becomes 0, and the reason he's going to the break zone is not because his power, or not because of the power reduction, but it's because his power is 0, and anything with a power of 0 has a rule process to check, and it gets put into the break zone because of a rule process, not because of an effect. If the effect said reduces forward's power, then put it in the break zone, that would count. But because all it's doing is reducing its power, and as an effect of that being put into the break zone, that doesn't. I realise this might be a bit confusing, but because the effect doesn't specifically say put into the break zone, break this forward, whatever, that doesn't count. And the power going to 0 is simply just a rule processing of the game. Right, so Unei, when you cast a summon, choose 1 forward you control, remove from the game, then play the remove forward onto the field dull. This effect will only trigger on your turn, only once per turn. So when Ardyn enters the field, you can choose a forward. It can't attack or block until the end of the next turn. Now the next turn means your opponent's turn. So you play him on your turn, and then you go to your opponent's turn. The forward that you chose can't attack that turn either, so it couldn't block the turn you played Ardyn, and it can't attack the turn after either. So your opponent's not going to be able to attack that forward for full other 2 turns. Now if you play Ardyn onto the field and cast something small with Unei on the field, you can then flicker Ardyn to make it so that 2 forwards cannot attack or block for 2 turns, which is really, really good, because that means that ultimately those forwards cannot block, and if you play Ardyn, then cast a summon, you've got 2 forwards there that can then attack through without fear of being blocked. That's fantastic. And then, on your opponent's turn, those forwards can't attack either. Now what's also cool is the fact that Ardyn's effect actually does work quite nicely with something like BFA, because you play Ardyn on the field, you choose BFA, it now can't block or attack. Obviously that will trigger BFA, sorry, Brass's final Aeon, and then the opponent will probably kill Ardyn. Ardyn gets put from the field into the break zone, he gets put back onto the field at the end of the turn. And that's just really cool, because he'll come back in and then you can choose something else if you really want to, and that means ultimately your opponent doesn't have something to block with that's huge, and something else when Ardyn re-enters as well, so quite a nice little combo. Noctis, he's a 15 forward, you break Noctis to play this Ardyn onto the field, and now a forward your opponent controls can't attack or block for another 2 turns. It's a nice way to be able to recur Ardyn if he does eventually die to something that he can't bounce back from. IMO, so your opponent wants to break a forward that isn't Ardyn, you use IMO to change the target from whatever it was to Ardyn. Ardyn obviously gets put in the break zone, and then at the end of the turn bounce back if the ability applies. Tama, so I quite like the idea of this, because you can, on your opponent's turn, use Tama to play Ardyn onto the field, which is quite useful. Say your opponent's attacking with an 8k, you break Tama to play Ardyn to the field. You can block with Ardyn if you want, but then you can also choose another of your opponent's forwards, which can't attack that turn as well, and also won't be able to block the following turn. And this might be quite nice when your opponent's got quite a big board and they're trying to go for gain. Maybe they've got 3 forwards, you need to take 3 points of damage, you've got nothing to block with. They attack with 1, you let the damage through. They attack with the second, you break Tama to bring in Ardyn. Ardyn blocks that 1 forward, and he is effectively blocking 2 forwards in that way, because he's then stopping another forward from attacking, and then on your turn, you now have to only get rid of those 2 forwards, because one of them can't block anymore on that turn. Leonis, just a nice way to recur him straight onto the field. So maybe Ardyn had attacked that turn, he died, and then you play Leonis to bring Ardyn back onto the field. You mean it could be a case of you played Ardyn onto the field, you then put Ardyn to the break zone for some sort of effect, and then you play Leonis to then bring him back. So again, you've got 2 forwards that cannot attack or block for 2 turns. And Mandragora. So if you are able to keep on recurring Ardyn back onto the field through his own effect, then yeah, it's excellent, because Mandragora's just going to keep on getting counters and eventually be able to break any of your opponent's backups. A Deer. Now this is a bit of a strange one. If you have a Deer on the field, obviously your opponent's forwards of cost 5 or more cannot block. It also includes your forwards as well, so be careful, because Ardyn himself won't be able to block. But what this means, effectively, is that your opponent's probably going to be attacking with their higher cost forwards, because they can't block anymore, whilst also making it so that all the small forwards are actually going to be blocking and not attacking. Playing something like Ardyn then means that you can actually make the smaller things not have to block, so you actually have a reduced amount of forwards to have to choose to make them not block. So maybe your opponent's got a 5 cost and then 2 4 costs. You can play Ardyn onto the field and then make it so that one of those can't block. Now your opponent's got 3 forwards, but only one of them can block, which is quite nice. Also, that other forward won't be able to attack the following turn, and again, as I mentioned, your opponent's probably not going to attack with another forward because that's their only blocker. So they start to really struggle with how are they going to block these forwards whilst you can keep on attacking through. Alright, Vargas. When a forward other than Vargas is put from the field into the break zone, Vargas gains plus 3,000 power until the end of the turn. When Vargas attacks, choose up to 1 forward your opponent controls. If Vargas has 10,000 power or more, activate it and it gains. If possible, this forward must block until the end of the turn. He's a 3 CP, 7k fire forward. And honestly, I don't understand how it's taking so long for this dude to get printed. We have like 2 or 3 Dadalumas now, who's a one-time boss in Final Fantasy TCG, and Vargas is Sabin's rival, and, you know, quite a big part of the story, and we've only just now gotten 15 sets into the game, but here we are. I'm not complaining. With these, okay card, I guess. But I think he has some fun interactions. So Ursula obviously can put a monk forward into the break zone to either gain plus 4,000 power or deal a forward damage equal to her power. Now that obviously goes quite nicely with Vargas, because if you put a forward into the break zone, you can then shoot that buffs Vargas by 3,000, and then you can attack with him and make one of your opponents block. But yeah, it's also worth noting that Ursula can actually put herself into the break zone to do either abilities as well, and it'd be kind of strange if you chose the plus 4,000, but at the same point, when she is put from the field into the break zone, they will reference the power up to the point of her leaving. So if she was 9k and then she puts herself into the break zone, you still get to deal 9k to a forward opponent controls, because that was what her power was before she left the field. Then you got Irvine. Yeah, so there's a fair few cards in the game where they're willing to break themselves to have a decent effect, and Irvine at damage 5 can deal 9k to a forward opponent controls, which is really, really good. So Irvine being able to put himself in the break zone, deal 9k to something, then buffing Vargas to then attack, forcing your opponent's one of the forwards opponent control to then block that and kill it as well. Vayne, a similar sort of thing. So Vayne, you can just obviously make Vargas basically 9k at that point, and you know, it could be a case of you've got Malboro on the field as well. You might be a mono fire, and you have Malboro on the field, so his static becomes 8. You then play Vayne, he then becomes a 10. You don't have to worry about any forwards being put from the field into the break zone anymore, because ultimately Vargas will, as long as Vayne's on the field and Malboro's on the field, always be 10k. So every time you attack with Vargas, you then get to choose one of your opponents, one of the forwards opponent controls, and it has to block. Lava Spider. So there's a bit of confusion about the way that Lava Spider works. A lot of people assume that he is an auto ability, but it's not the case. He is a static, just field effect. Now the reason for that is the attacking forwards you control gain plus 3,000 power. If he were an auto ability, it would read, when a forward attacks, it gains plus 3,000 power. that would act as a trigger, because when a forward attacks. But this is just attacking forwards you control gain plus 3000 power. And that means when Vargas attacks, he looks at a forward and says, I'm choosing you. And then he checks his own power. Is he attacking? Yes. Then he's plus 3000, which means he is then a 10k forward, so he then gets to make that chosen forward block. So yeah, Lava Spider works more like Opus 1 Maria or Vayne that we just looked at, where it's just a static field effect and isn't a trigger effect at all. So your opponent can't Amaterasu Lava Spider. It's just a case of, it's a field effect. Chelinka, if Vargas is huge, make him attack twice and make 2 of your opponent's forwards have to block and probably break as well. Now, obviously, if Vargas attacks and is blocked by 2 fairly large forwards, then the chances are Vargas is going to die. But if it gets rid of 2 of your opponent's big forwards that are troublesome, then that's not too bad. And it's also worth noting as when a forward other than Vargas is put from field into the break zone, that includes your opponent's forwards as well. So ultimately, when Vargas attacks and makes one of your opponent's forwards have to block and that forward dies, Vargas then gains plus 3000 again. So he might already be at 10k, you attack, they block, that dies, he then becomes 13k, you attack, kill another forward, and that plus 3k might actually be enough just to keep Vargas alive. Maybe your opponent blocked with a 3k or a 4k, and then they blocked with, I don't know, 7k the second time. That's still 10k, but he's now 13k, so it doesn't really matter. And Leon, when a forward of 10,000 power or more you control attacks, draw 1 card. This works excellently with Lava Spider and Chelinka, because obviously every time he attacks, basically Leon checks to see, are you 10,000 power? Okay, cool. Then you get to draw a card. Now with the Lava Spider, that would mean Vargas attacks, he is 10k, you get a card off of Leon, you attack a second time because of Chelinka, again still 10k, and you get another card. Now, as I mentioned, because of the fact that Lava Spider isn't a triggered auto ability, it means that he doesn't gain plus 3000 every single time he attacks, he just, if he is attacking, gains plus 3000 power. And finally, Amaranth. So, Dull, put 1 forward into the break zone, choose 1 forward, deal it damage equal to the power of the forward put into the break zone. So this is quite nice because it works with Vargas in a couple of ways, because Amaranth can ultimately put a forward you control into the break zone. That would then give Vargas plus 3000 power, and then you also get to deal damage to one of the forwards your opponent controls. If it's a bigger forward, then that works excellently. Or, once Vargas has attacked and is quite big, say he's already 10k, your opponent has to block, they block it, and then you can use Amaranth to put Vargas into break zone to then deal 10k to another forward your opponent controls that you really just want to get rid of. And that's it. Pretty short and sweet one this week, but there's a lot of crazy things going on at the moment, and that includes the next behind the card, which is going to be focusing on Final Fantasy IV, which has had a lot of great cards, especially in Opus 15 recently. But yeah, there's just so many good 4 cards. 4 is one of the best supported games in the TCG, I think, because many of the cards are just really consistently strong, and there's a lot of support for just minor characters as well. So you've got characters like Baigan and the Dark Elf, and I mean even more support for all the main characters. I mean, how many Palams and Porums are there now, and Cecils and Golbezes and Canes? There's just so many. I mean, I know there are a lot of Lightnings in the game, but ultimately there is just a huge amount of 4 characters as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. See you in the next video, and be lucky.